All right, Dr. G, Andy, how you doing, guys?
Great.
Great.
Awesome. Let's give our listeners a brief background on both of you first, in case this is the first time jumping on the podcast with us. We've got Dr. G. He's a renowned board-certified chiropractic neurologist dedicated to holistic health. He is one of America's leading experts in lifelong optimized living, having trained thousands of clients and practitioners within his training program, and he has over 800,000 Instagram followers. Andrew Cieply is a nutrition expert and a head coach at Co-Movement Gym with over 12 years experience training clients. Our topic today is an interesting topic, a fun one. It's about a man, Angus Barberi from Scotland, who went 382 days without eating, and he lost 276 pounds in the process. And so today we're going to dive into that. The Co-Movement Gym podcast is sponsored by Native Path Supplements, Lombardi Chiropractic, and A Dog's Day Out Doggy Daycare. Mention this podcast or use the promo code in the episode description for a nice discount on us. I want to start off, Andy, can you fill our listeners in a little bit, sort of with the background of what went on with this man?
Yeah, sure. You basically just covered it. It's pretty simple. It's a really well-known story, though, because he still holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest fast ever done by a human. And that won't be broken, actually, in Guinness, because Guinness no longer supports that kind of record because they're worried about health concerns. But yeah, he's the person who's fasted longest out of any human in history that's recorded anyway. This was back in the 1960s, I believe, 64 maybe. And he did it for the purpose of losing weight. He was morbidly obese, weighed over 400 pounds. I don't remember what the exact number was. But with a team of doctors, he decided that he was going to fast to start his weight loss journey. And after going for about a month, he decided to keep it going. And he ended up going over a year. I think he said it was 380 days, something like that. And throughout the entire 382 days or whatever he fasted for, he was losing on average about 22 pounds per day throughout the entire period.
Per
His
month.
goal was to get down to 180 pounds, and he eventually achieved that, and that's when he stopped the fast. And I'll say, I guess, as far as like what the fast consisted of, he was not taking in any solid food at all. He was only drinking water, black coffee, and tea. And he was being given micronutrients, some vitamins, some minerals, some electrolytes, that sort of thing, in fluid form by his doctors who were attending to him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about it.
Yeah, that's so Andy, you had said 22 pounds per day. It was per month, right?
Per month. Yeah, I'm sorry. Per month.
Per
Yep.
month. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, not per day. He would
That's
have
all
gotten to
good.
his goal a lot quicker that way.
Yeah. Steve, did you hear about this story when it came out, or is this news to you?
No, I've been hearing about this. Has been, in the fasting world, since fasting has become such a popular thing to do. It's definitely been it's a story that has been on a lot of podcasts, been on it's been discussed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I guess let's I'm curious how this is even possible. Feel free, either one of you, to sort of jump in and explain, because I'm sure listeners are thinking like, oh, I go 12 hours and I'm starving. Like, how does he go more than a year without taking in calories and not die? How does that work in his body? How did that work systematically for him?
Well,
Well,
one of the things we know about fasting physiology is that it is going, the human, if we just try to think of what it's been like to be human for the last, I don't know, 100,000 years, before agriculture, it kind of makes sense that there were a lot of people that were living on this planet in weird environments, in, let's say, the Arctic Circle, or even just in areas where there could be great abundance, and then there could be a whole lot of lack, right? So just imagine you're with your tribe or whatever, and you kill a deer, and consume it, and then, it's wintertime and you're in 6 feet of snow, and I don't know, a couple of weeks could go by before you have your next kill. There's certainly nothing to pick off the trees. So the human body is certainly adapted to being able to have extended periods of fasting. The way we live today, we just find that to be so bizarre and strange, because we have such abundance, especially in the Western world. We wake up every day to a refrigerator and a pantry full of food, and when we feel hungry, we go ahead and satiate ourselves, and we actually associate hunger with pain, right? I mean, it's a really negative thing. And I grew up in the 1980s when we saw what famines were like, and I think in the last couple of decades we saw that more people had overnutrition in the world than undernutrition. So we've kind of really solved the lack of calorie problem for most of the world, certainly in this country. So being adapted to being able to fast is something that's foreign to us, and this is why fasting has become something that people want to try, because of the health benefits, but also, it makes you wonder, when you get very hungry, does that just get worse and worse and worse and worse? And it actually doesn't. If you've done any extended period of fasting, once your body enters a state of fasting physiology, and we can talk about that, then your brain and your central nervous system are kind of satiated by breaking down your own tissue and using that for fuel, and you do not sense this sense. You don't have this sense of crisis. Actually, hunger goes down So this is something that this person no doubt experienced. It's something that people who fast for more than 24 hours have experienced. There are, plenty of stories of people who've done 3, 5, 7, 11, 40-day fasts, and actually they report really feeling great. Now, going a year, something that I kind of have a hard time wrapping my head around that. But one of the aspects of fasting physiology is you go into a physiology we call ketosis. It's where you kind of break down your own body fat in order to supply yourself with the energy you need to run the systems. One of the things that going into ketosis does is preserve muscle. Now, you can't go a year preserving muscle, right? You're going to lose muscle with fasting. There's no question about it. But being in ketosis means that you're going to skew your physiology to break down fat a lot more than breaking down muscle. Think about muscle as being, protein, and protein is very valuable. I always like to say, yes, we can, of course, break down protein and muscle for energy. It's certainly a process that we can do, but it's not a good idea. It's kind of like, your boiler doesn't work, and you need heat in the wintertime. And instead of going out and getting firewood from your backyard, you start ripping your $10,000 furniture apart and throwing it in the fire. It doesn't make sense to catabolize your house before you go through the firewood, right? So that's kind of the analogy. You want to preserve the expensive muscle that you spent a lot of time and money developing, and then just use your body fat as your fuel source, at least as much as possible. So that's kind of how you would go into an extended fast. That's what happens to the body. When you're low in blood sugar and the body senses a decrease in energy, you start to develop hunger pains or a feeling of being hungry. But once you let your body know, well, no food is coming, there is no more glucose coming, then you start opening up your fat cells, sending those triglycerides into your liver and converting that into ketones. And then the brain says, oh, I'm okay. I have energy. I have a full tank. So, most people have plenty of fat on their body. Even you guys who are incredibly lean, you still have plenty of fat in your body to handle an extended fast. So the fat for fuel idea is best experienced through fasting.
Yeah.
Andy, you
Yeah, and
want to
just
add
to
anything to that?
add to that,
Yeah.
yeah, just what you had said, Josh, in the beginning. You had asked, like, how is it possible for somebody to go 382 days without food? How does their system possibly handle that? And Dr. G laid it out beautifully there. Um, to stay alive, we need certain things. We need vitamins, we need minerals, electrolytes. He was getting those things. We need water. You're going to need amino acids to preserve protein, which he was getting in the form of yeast extract, just a small amount. Um, but you also need energy, and that's where people are like, how could you possibly make it 382 days? Typically we get our energy from carbohydrates and from fat that we eat. And people forget that, or maybe just overlook the fact that the fat that you have on your body, the adipose tissue, is stored energy. And so that's how energetically it's possible. He had he was 400 something pounds when he started. He had a lot of stored energy that he could just use throughout that entire year period that he was fasting. And that met the energetic requirements.
Native Path has been a podcast sponsor of ours since day one. And it's because our clients feel amazing using their supplements. While a lot of products on the market today contain useless fillers and incorrect dosages, Native Path holds to a higher standard. Native Path's ingredients are sourced from only the highest quality, properly combined nutrients, all while being offered at competitive prices. Use code COMO15, that's COMO 15 at checkout, and receive 15% off each order. Lombardi Chiropractic has been Co-Movement's trusted chiropractor for the last 14 years. They have worked with hundreds of our clients, and I can confidently say they have the most knowledgeable and holistic approach to care that I have ever seen. Whether you suffer from migraines, low energy, nagging pain, or just simply want to improve your overall health, I highly recommend contacting the team at Lombardi Chiropractic. Mention the Co-Movement Gym podcast and receive 50% off your initial consultation and x-rays. Here at Co-Movement, we put a lot of energy into helping you become happy, healthy, and strong. But we're not the only ones needing a good workout. That's why a dog's day out is the best place in Central New York for your pet to spend their day. Your dog will be as happy and healthy as you when you let them run, play, and socialize instead of just sitting on the couch waiting for you to come home. Give your dog the active day out that they deserve. Mention this podcast and get a free day of doggy daycare at a dog's day out. Okay, so let's talk about the appetite. And you had said like people don't really get hungry past a certain point. And so the hormone ghrelin, is that can you explain how that works with fasting?
Oh, sure. Yes, we do have hormones that will dictate. This is a process that's mediated in a part of our brain we call the hypothalamus, which is kind of like what regulates our primary needs. To satiate, reproduction and hunger and thirst and all of that. So there is a hormone called ghrelin that we pretty much will release in anticipation of a meal time, right? So if you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's pretty consistent, you'll release ghrelin like on a pretty regular basis. So if you normally have breakfast at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., you can pretty much bet that your ghrelin is going to go up just prior to that. So you're meeting that. Again, those are hormones that are dictated by energetic needs that we have. So for example, when your blood sugar starts to go down before you start producing ketones, there's going to be a reduction of a process we call mTOR, which is activated by consuming food and energy, and you're going to increase AMPK, and AMPK activation is going to it's a nutrient sensor or a lack of nutrient sensor, right? So it's going to sense that there's lower ATP production. You're going to, or there's an increase in expended ATP, and that's going to start your body to start reacting to what its next step is going to be. If it senses that it's not going to get the food, if the ghrelin is released, the ghrelin tells you you're hungry, there's no food to get, right? Again, put yourself kind of in the wild. You want food, there's just no food to get. Then that ghrelin is going to go down, and then you're going to start the process of mobilizing your energy stores through the activation of different hormones, right? And that is kind of the way the body will. So I always say appetite and hunger come in waves. So if your energy starts to go down, you start to feel hungry. If you wait long enough, that goes away, right? A lot of people who trying to lose weight experience, being full after dinner, and they're satiated, and then they find that 10 minutes after dinner, they're craving something sweet, right? And I always say that's going to hit you strong. It's going to hit you like a wave that's very strong, but that wave is going to recede, and then the waters will be calm again. And if you just take the dog for a walk or something like that, you'll experience that craving kind of go away. So cravings for food will increase and decrease based on hormones that we have in the presence or absence of food.
So, I've experienced that. And Andy, I know you have too. Andy, you've done, have you done 7 days of a fast? Is that your longest?
Yeah, 7 days is the longest that I've done, and then 3 or 4 days a couple times. Yep.
Yeah, and I've done 3-day fasts. So let's talk, Andy, on your end with the 3 to 7 days. How did that go for you? Like, what was your experience like?
It was fine. It was really interesting to me. I'll get to what I learned in a sec, but like Dr. G had said, a lot of people would expect that, if you go a time without food or you skip a meal, then you get hungry. You get that rise in ghrelin and you feel that wave of hunger. And a lot of people would expect that, well, if I'm hungry now, 2 hours from now, I'm going to be even more hungry. And 6 hours after that, I'm going to be even more hungry. And tomorrow, I'm going to be even more hungry. Like you would think if you abstain from eating that your hunger is just going to rise and rise and rise. But like Dr. G said, it's really interesting that it actually subsides.
So, yeah, the expectation is hunger gets worse and worse and worse and gets more and more painful. And I always say when I do an extended fast or when I instruct someone to do an extended fast, and there are different reasons to do it. There are medical reasons to do it. There's feel-good reasons to do it. There's reasons not to do it. But what I usually say is, if you're going to do a 5-day fast, I can promise you the first day is the worst and the last day is the easiest. And that's what most people do experience. One of the things that can mess that whole system up is a poor night's sleep and stress, which is kind of the same thing. But for the most part, an extended fast is hardest on the front end and easiest on the back end.
I agree completely. The first and second days were the hardest on the fast. That's when I felt the most hunger. And then days 3, 4, and 5 were easy. I didn't have much hunger. I had a lot of energy, mentally, everything was sharp and focused. Yeah, easiest on the last day. And what I learned the most, I think, from the fast is just the difference between hunger and wanting to eat. I think that's a really valuable lesson to learn. A lot of times we eat out of boredom or for entertainment purposes. Sure. I just really like food and the taste of it. But you start to learn that you're not actually as hungry, or you don't really need to eat sometimes when you think you're hungry. You just want to eat.
Yeah, that's so true. Let's circle back here. I've done 2 3-day fasts. And everything that Andy and Dr. G had said, like the first day is the hardest. It's you go to bed and you think you're going to wake up, the next day starving. And then the last day isn't so bad. I lost, I think it was 6 pounds over 3 days of eating no food, which wasn't bad. And I had great energy, great clarity. It was overall a pretty positive experience. And so I want to ask Dr. G a question about the show alone. The participants go, out into the wild. They have to catch their food. They go long periods of time, without eating. And what I find is that, around day 10 to 14, a lot of them start to get like a wave of like nausea and like really, really high levels of weakness. They may be eating sporadic, grouse or a squirrel or maybe a fish. But I was thinking like, because some of these participants have higher levels of body fat, but they're not taking in electrolytes. Is that sort of what they're missing out on? When they start to feel like crap, around that 10-day mark, Dr. G, or no?
So when it comes to nausea while you're fasting, it really shouldn't, especially after 10 days, that really shouldn't be the case. Now, what can trigger that is a wave of adrenaline, right? So if for some reason there's a stressful time of the day, or there was poor night's sleep, or something that would increase stress hormone production like cortisol and adrenaline, especially cortisol. Cortisol has an effect on the GI tract that results in actually acid production without having food in your stomach. Matter of fact, chronic long-term overproduction of cortisol actually thins the entire lining of the GI tract and leaves you susceptible to injury to the lining of the upper GI in particular. And that can result in a nauseous kind of feeling. But I'm not too sure if that's the only mechanism. There could be others. I'd just be guessing.
Yeah. So I know the first fast that I did, and Andy, you would remember this, but I wasn't taking in sodium, and I felt horrible. And then as soon as I started to take in, electrolytes and sodium especially, I felt much better. So, Andy, why was there such a difference there for me?
Honestly, without looking it up, I can't tell you. We've read about this in the past and talked about it, but I don't want to say something that I can't speak accurately on. But I will say that that's very common, that people find that without adequate salt intake during the fast, they have headaches, nausea, other issues like that. And often just a pinch of salt in their water is enough to alleviate those issues for them. So it's often recommended that people take in sodium when they fast.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. No, I felt a world better. All right, so let's dive in now. Andy, and I'll speak with you about this. So there is a study done of 24,000 Americans of age over 40 and older, and they found that those who ate one meal per day were 30% more likely to die from any cause in 15 years than those who ate 3 meals per day. What is this study about? Because it came out with the headline that you and I saw that basically like you're gonna die sooner if you intermittent fast. What was that about?
I don't remember the details of that study. That was 6 months ago or so, but I do remember that a lot of people tore into it for being poorly designed and a bit misleading. But even just that headline makes me wonder, like, for example, there could be a selection bias. The sort of people who do intermittent fasting are usually the kind of people who are doing it because they need to lose weight. So you're talking about an overweight or obese group already. So is it any surprise that group had more health issues if they were a group that was already had health problems to begin with, and that's why they were doing the fasting, But I'd have to see the design of that study to know if there are any problems with it as far as design goes and what we could draw as far as conclusions.
Yeah, I remember getting a series of like text messages from people that were all like freaking out, when they had saw that
Hmm.
headline. But the first thing I thought of was exactly what you said. Like, what were the control factors? Like, who were these people going into the study? Like, what were they eating for their one meal a day? Was it McDonald's versus healthy food? And like the people eating the
Yeah,
three
there's so
meals a
many X
day.
factors in this.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So for people that did, for our listeners, if you did see that, intermittent fasting is not bad for you, and I don't believe that it kills you earlier or sooner. I think we're big proponents of that. And so let's talk about some protocols for people, Andy, with
Well, well,
fasting.
one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, and especially I was curious about with Dr. G, is if he still does much fasting, whether intermittent or extended fasting, as part of his regular yearly routine or yours. Because I have noticed in the past like 3 to 5 years, a lot of people, a lot of health experts who were very big on fasting, are starting to become less so. It's
Uh-huh.
kind of falling out of favor the more that some research keeps coming out. So, like for example, like Dr. Peter Attia has talked about this recently. He used to do a 3 day fast once a month, and he did a 7 day fast once a quarter. So he was a huge fan of fasting for autophagy and supposed longevity benefits and so on. But he now, as you know, and we're big on this as well, the preservation of muscle mass is something that
Yes.
we care about a lot, especially as we get older, and that's one of the biggest predictors of longevity.
Uh-huh.
And he felt that the catabolic effects of fasting, especially doing extended fasting, and the loss of muscle that he was experiencing was too big of a downside to justify any of the potential benefits he might get from fasting.
Uh-huh.
And I especially think about the older population, like, as we get to be 50, 60, 70 years old, now muscle loss becomes even more of an issue. Preserving muscle
Yes.
is like the name of the game as you get into your later years. And malnutrition is also an issue in the aging population. They just don't take in enough food, get enough vitamins, and so on. I kind of wonder if maybe there's a difference between perhaps fasting is more beneficial and better tolerated in younger groups and maybe should be approached with caution in older populations.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I was wondering, like, what you guys think about all that. If fasting is something you still do or recommend, or if it's something that you're more cautious with now and don't do as often.
Yeah, so I'll tackle that. I think we lost Dr. G. I apologize to the listeners. We have some technical issues, but yeah, so for me it's funny. I definitely perform better and I feel better athletically not
Mm-hmm,
fasting more than
mm-hmm,
12 to 14 hours at a time.
yep,
That's my window. Like I'm already really lean. I work out probably about 7 hours a week, nothing crazy. But
yep.
I know that when I go, 16, 18 hours and then I eat and then I try to get a workout in and life is busy and it's just too hard to keep any mass or size on. And it's just too much for my body, you know.
So, so can I say something about that? Because that's another one of my points is talking about different populations. I think fasting may work better for, let's say, the sedentary, overweight
Yeah,
person who
totally.
works a desk job, comes home, spends most of their time on the couch. Um, you know, the body can only handle so much stress, and
Yeah.
if we're talking about someone like you who works out regularly, pretty intensely, exercise is a stress that we put on our body, and it's a good stress. We adapt and we become stronger, but your body can only handle so much stress. If you were to exercise too much, you'd be overtraining, and then your body would break down. You'd experience fatigue and all those negative symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Fasting is also a stress on the body. So if you're an athlete or a regular exerciser and you're already stressing your body in that way, is it smart to add something like intermittent fasting or extended fasting to that? Now you've got two different stresses on the body. Because I think we see in the health space, a lot of people try to do everything. So you get the person who does like, they're going to intermittent fast and not have their first breakfast or not have their breakfast until 1 p.m. But they're going to go to their morning CrossFit class and hammer it. And they're also going to eat keto and they're going to, and they try to do everything. And sometimes I think people put too much stress on their body.
Yep.
So that might be another case where fasting is something to proceed with caution with. Certainly, you always hear that athletes perform better when they're eating regularly and with large amounts of food and they're not fasting. Typically, the athletes or the regular exerciser who tries fasting abandons it within a few weeks just for performance reason.
Yeah. And that you totally nailed that. And so just to summarize for listeners, like we're sort of dividing people somewhat into two camps, right? Like if you're sedentary, you're overweight and unhealthy, fasting, especially for longer periods of time, potentially could be quite beneficial for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting our sponsors, Native Path Supplements, Lombardi Chiropractic, and A Dog's Day Out Doggy Daycare. They help us bring you 2 new episodes each month and have a special discount just for our listeners. See the show notes for more details. Thank you, and see you next time on the Co-Movement Gym Podcast.